I'm Reverend Sara Lewis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Community and Faith Development here. So thank you for attending our forum today. We'll begin by lighting a chalice. These chalice lighting words are by Paul Sprecher. We light this chalice in memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who've struggled for justice, and the love of those who've built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope. So, our forum today is about the Unitarian Universalist Association's Congregational Study Action issue. What on earth is that? That's what we're here to explore. What is that? So this is something that is normally done every 3 years, but there was a gap where the UUA had not done any study action issues for a while, and so they've restarted the process. And it's a 3-year process, as you can see here. I probably made the text a little too small, so bear with me, I'll also explain it. In the first year of the process, there's a deadline where organizations can submit suggested study issues. So there was a team that helped organizations make sure that their proposal was going to be complete and get out in time for General Assembly delegates to vote on the proposals. We had last year in 2024 was the deadline for submissions, and then at General Assembly this year, 2025, there were 3 that had made it through the proposal process to be voted on. And 1 was the final selected by the voting delegates. And that's the study issue that we will talk about today. The others that were proposed also got many votes. And there was one that was about housing justice, and there was one that was about fat liberation. So lots of different issues to lift up as possible study issues. The one that received the most votes from the delegates was abolition, transformation, and faith formation. And so that's the study issue that we'll talk about today. So now, heading into year 2 of the process, congregations will soon be receiving a resource to engage in this study. So it has not been released yet, but there are folks who are working on some study guides that may help us engage deeper with this study issue. And then congregations are encouraged to do that study guide, to do the work, and to then bring ideas for what a possible statement of conscience could be for all UUs to state what we believe in our conscience about this issue. And that's what goes to General Assembly in year 3, is a drafted proposed statement of conscience. And if the delegates vote to accept that statement of conscience, that's now us as the UUA, us as all the UUs of all the congregations, stating that this is how we feel about this issue, and this is what we want to see done about it. It will require a 2/3 vote of the delegates to adopt a statement of conscience. So it needs to be a majority that agree with that statement of conscience for it to become adopted. So I'll pause there, and I have a microphone to run around if anyone has questions. Are there any comments or questions so far? It's fine if there aren't. Karen, I'm going to switch to this mic. Thanks. Yeah, and totally fine if there aren't any comments or questions, but I'll be ready to run around now. And if there's any online, feel free to put them in the chat or to raise your hand. Do you have a comment or question?
What does the thing mean?
What does the thing mean? The abolition, yes, that is what we're going to talk about right next. So great segue in. Yeah. So, so this particular congregational study action issue, abolition, transformation, and faith formation, was proposed by the Church of the Larger Fellowship. And they stated in their proposal that it is grounded in our values. But this is how they defined it. Abolition is a holistic approach to systemic social change that includes, but is not limited to, the abolition of slavery, the replacing of systems and cultures of violence, coercion, and control with transformative justice and relational practices, and dismantling the prison industrial complex as we now know it. It requires the transformation of our society and the replacement of our current public theologies of retributive justice and violence. A commitment to the practices and ideals of abolition would ask our congregations to make connections among many threads of our social justice work. So it is really about the transformation of the root causes of violence in our society and the transformation of how we handle our prison industrial complex that we've built and look for other forms of dealing with violence besides this current system that this country operates within. Any further exploration of that we'd like to, any comments, questions? Yes, John.
It seems to me a pretty thorough definition you gave us. Someone's obviously done a lot of work on it.
That's why I'm just reading it word for word, because they did put a lot of work into it. Yeah, they've really defined a lot of this for us already. And so then where do we go from there? We can study it and decide on some further questions for us to wrestle with. Yeah. And so they've stated how they see it as grounded in our theology. That their statement is that universalism teaches us that our worthiness is not defined by our sins or lack thereof. If we truly believe this, we are charged to develop better ways to treat people who do harm or who are unjustly accused of doing harm. And so we believe that our faith calls us to imagine a future in which none of our siblings are shackled and caged. Now that theology is partly how, I explored that a lot in last week's service about that as universalists, we don't believe in punishment by God for sins. And yet we have in this life developed in this country punishment systems. So what else could our faith call us to besides shackled and caged punishment systems? So that's how they find it to be grounded in our theology. And then it's also grounded in our history. So many of our spiritual ancestors embraced the abolition of slavery in the United States and are rightly celebrated as heroes of our faith. Theodore Parker, pictured here, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Elhanan Winchester, Lydia Maria Child, William Lloyd Garrison, Lucy Stone, so many more. And yet that abolition project is left unfinished because the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, left it except as a punishment for a crime. And that's something that we may explore further, understanding this history and the through thread in our United States history from slavery to mass incarceration. Yeah. So I'll pause there as well, if that is bringing up any thoughts for anyone or questions.
I guess I would just say that the use of the terminology abolition connects with another issue that I've been involved with a lot, which is the abolition of the death penalty, and which takes punishment to, obviously, to a whole nother level. So I just want to throw that in.
Yeah, definitely. And abolition, just is the end of something, abolishing something. Yeah, online?
If you could ask Taylor to speak.
All right, we're going to be inviting Taylor to speak.
Unmute. Oh, I was just like, it's such an interesting way to think about it. And I was thinking about the house I grew up in. It was built in the 1820s, 1829, I think it was. And the first people who lived there were like just your average schmo. But then somebody else moved in, and he was a staunch like Confederate. But sometime before the war, he had a brain change. And he dug 2 tunnels in our house. There's one in the floor and one in what's now the laundry room. And I always wondered, how did he get there? How did he decide that he wanted to change so drastically? Because he was very hardline Confederate, I understand. And apparently it was actually very active from what we learned. And I was wondering, and of course, it was always tempting like to see what was in the tunnel, because my parents hired some friends with Smithsonian to look at it. And so they told us about the guy who owned the house and how he dug the tunnel. And then we have, they actually found stuff in the tunnel from the air. I was like, wow. I was like, so many questions I'll think about now when I'm older. Because, I was 8, but, yeah.
All right, a little pause for tech transition. Thank you so much, Taylor. Yeah, it's wonderful that you had that personal connection to some history like that and see actual work that was done by someone. And that question, how did they change their heart and their conscience on that issue? That's a big question. How do we change? How does that happen, that people learn and grow and find new understandings? We can all be transformed. And that is, I think, part of the call of this study issue, is what transformation is required in our society for this vision of not needing the prison industrial complex anymore and getting to root causes of violence.
This idea of trying to get rid of the carceral system kind of makes me think of a conversation I was having yesterday with a friend about surveillance, right? There's so many cameras around and data is being collected from our computers without our consent and all that kind of stuff, but that's theoretically, at least based on some philosophies, what we have to allow in order to get rid of prisons. If we're under constant surveillance, then people will be afraid to break the law, which obviously is very disturbing as well. But I don't know, is it better than the prison system? Obviously, prison is better than drawing and quartering and like public hangings and very, very publicly violent, humiliating punishments. But there's surveillance, I think, maybe is a step better than prison, but I don't know. Making that transformation sounds very disturbing.
Yes, you're making me think of all the dystopian science fiction of other options where Star Trek crew lands on a planet that has no prisons, and then they discover that it's because they've developed mind control. And I don't think that's the direction that we're trying to go with the transformation. But yeah, that's a question of what other options are acceptable and in line with our values. So the root causes also, this is a pretty, as proposed by the Church at Large, or Fellowship, it's a pretty broad in their interpretation of what we might be working on, because this is what they said: we believe that in order to fully embrace abolition, we need to restructure our society in ways that eliminate violence, discrimination, and the causes of these things. At CLF, we connect our theology of abolition with issues such as the genocide in Gaza, ICE detention, discriminatory housing, food deserts, climate justice, and other social justice issues. We must abolish the processes of dehumanization which made the prison industrial complex possible in the first place. That combination of changing systems, hearts, minds, and spirit is all a part of the liberatory theology of Unitarian Universalism. So this call is going way broader than just finding other ways to manage criminal behavior. Yeah, and online? We are inviting Tori to speak from online.
Thanks. I think, can you hear me? Let's see, can you hear me?
We can. Yes, we
okay,
can.
Okay, great. I think that sort of answered my question, but I was kind of wanting to understand the scope. So the focus really is on how can we decrease violence, with changes to the prison system being one option, but we would also explore other ways to reduce the violence in our communities and homes and society. Is that correct?
As I understand the scope, yes. The scope is very broad. So one part of it may be the reformation of the prison system. That would be a modest goal, perhaps. And it could be all the way out to the broad goal of how do we address the root causes of violence to bring down all violence. And they've identified some root causes here as dehumanization and discrimination and poverty. But we might look at others. I mean, I am a big fan of the thought that teaching emotional self-regulation is violence prevention. And so we might look at how we are bringing that into childhood education, or what resourcing we're giving adults for mental health.
I remember a study that showed that lead in paint and gasoline increased violence. So I'm thinking nutrition would be a big part of what we're doing here to help people be sane through nutrition.
Yeah, and I don't think lead is the only environmental toxin that affects human behavior either. There's environmental toxins have been shown to be part of the problem. And we have an online. Taylor. We're calling on Taylor again.
Sorry, chewing. Anything about I've actually seen some stories where I think it was in Baltimore when the Orange Menace was considering going to Baltimore. I think it was the mayor was like, no, thank you. We've had some success. He said with violence.
I think, yeah, sorry, Taylor, you froze. But yeah, you were talking about Baltimore and the mayor declining. Oh,
I read that they were having some success in places like Baltimore where there's organized nonprofits who are violence interrupters, trained intervention people who go into those hard-hit communities that try to, boost up the capacity building for folks and just to intervene when things are getting violent and show a different way. I've also read somewhere that the prison system in like Europe is a lot different, like in like Denmark. Yeah.
Thank you, Taylor. Yes, there's definitely other models around the world that we can look to, and societies that have structured their carceral system very differently. We incarcerate more people, per capita in the United States than any other developed nation. So this is a big problem. We could look to other places to see what they do instead. And the reference to the programs like violence interrupters, yeah, there's lots of other options out there that, that we could study and see how we could support other things besides the current model, which is getting even more aggressive. Yeah. So that's just an introduction to what we've been asked to do for the next year or so. And so I wanted to ask what thoughts you have of ways that OUC could engage with this study issue. The first part really is to study it, but the second is to think about how we can take action. So ideas of both, things that we might do here, books, film studies, discussions, anything that you think would be useful. And if there are ideas that you have for actions that we could take as we explore this issue of abolition as well. Of course, we will get the resource guide that's coming soon. And I have a few ideas, but I also just would love to hear your ideas. And if you have questions that you'd love us to research more, I'll come right back to you.
Thank you. I don't know how to put this completely, but I think that idea of violence, I mean, funny enough, it's the same sort of school of philosophy that I was talking about earlier. The guy kind of drew this, he was just thinking critically about violence is bad, right? So yes, violence is bad, but this particular thinker had a lot of internalized shame about their sexual appetite, because there is a certain sort of like violence that comes with domination and submission. So when it comes to like being, it's just a very out there kind of idea, which I'm fully aware of, but I just wanted to kind of bring up that idea of violence as, it's not necessarily bad and something we have to shame ourselves for.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting part of the study. It actually is what is violence and understanding it more. I mean, certainly again, you're bringing me back to science fiction over and over again, but again, there's this science fiction storyline of if we eliminated the human impulse to violence by eliminating our emotions, or the goal here isn't an unjust elimination of violence, it's a just and loving elimination of violence. So yeah, there's stuff to explore there for sure.
This abolition thing, is it overall against prisons in general, or is it saying like all these nonviolent crimes and similar? Because I'm thinking like super violent people and stuff, I'm a little bit more hesitant on letting them back into the community.
Yeah, that scope of what we're actually talking about will probably be one of the things that when we actually get to writing a statement of conscience, everybody's going to have to wrestle with. And definitely, there's a whole spectrum of, only for violent offenses, or, prisons that are more about rehabilitation. or none at all. You know, there's a whole spectrum of what people talk about, so we will have to wrestle with that a little bit. I'll come right at you next, but I see an online.
Yeah, if you could read from the chat this part from Taylor there.
All right, so Taylor put in the chat, spiritual community-based violence interruption recovery programs, a ministry plus advocacy. Also, violence, its punitive responses are kind of addictive. We're used to it and we expect it. So it takes time and advocacy and awareness. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah. Yeah, so to Alice.
So one way to frame or I frame it as the sense of public safety and what is needed for us to feel safe as a society. And so if violence is making people not safe, what do we need to do without being excessive about sentencing people to 50 years in prison when they can be rehabilitated in a much shorter period of time?
Yes, thank you for bringing that question of community safety versus, you know, violence and punishment. Those are two different sides of the coin. Yeah. Yeah, so we definitely could explore that as well. What is community safety? And I find they keep making the studies really hard to do, but the community health study approach to like gun violence, where they approach it like an epidemic, like a disease, and use those same tools to study what causes the spread, that's a really interesting way to approach it also. So are there community health approaches that might be part of this study? Could be. Yeah. Anything that anyone thinks we particularly at OUC should work on? I mean, is there anything in particular that we are in a position to need to study?
I do think it's interesting to look at what other countries are doing, and I think there are some countries that are doing a much, much better job than we are as far as how they respond to violence and crime.
Yeah, thank you.
I was just thinking about this morning on my way here. I saw a man on the corner without a shirt on, just really soaking up the sun, obviously indigent, but that just, when you asked about this at OUC, I was thinking about wealth inequality and the violence of wealth inequality.
Yeah, and we definitely see examples of that right here in Olympia. Yeah. It's kind of a question to relate also to our sense of community safety. You know, how can we unpack the difference between our discomfort around wealth inequality and actually being unsafe? And online, yeah?
We have two chats, or three now, starting with this one from Holly.
All right. So Holly writes, in light of yet another recent church shooting, all the countries that have gun control laws have fewer mass shootings. UU's advocating for gun control could help make a difference. Yes. And Tori writes, we might want to learn about what changes the Department of Corrections is making to move from punishment to rehabilitation. Yes. And Taylor writes, it's not all like Pearl Jam all the time, even flow. All right. Yeah, so we do have a team here, one parish, one prisoner team, who are working with one incarcerated person. John's on that team. And so I know they're talking about some educating, like screening the documentary film 13th here sometime soon. And so there is that whole, just what's going on with the prison system. And there's also what is going on with our current, it's interesting to have this be our study issue in light of current political climate in this country. And so clearly we have the ICE detention centers, and that's another whole form of incarceration. Yeah. Anything else that anybody's would love to see happen here at OUC in the next 6 months or so? And it's okay, this isn't you volunteering yourself to do it. Normally I say, if you want to do it, okay, so how are you going to make that happen? Don't give me a to-do list. But right now we're just dreaming, so that's okay. What would we like to see happen? All right.
I really feel like the first step is education. And so whatever we can do to make ourselves more aware of what works, what doesn't work, and so we can form our goals better that way.
All right, education, what works and what doesn't work, and some of the examples that are out there. All right, well, I have a few suggestions that CLF gave us. So I'll read some of them and just, you can give me a pulse of how exciting these seem. So we could explore our UU theologies around sin, redemption, repentance, and repair. I'm seeing like, okay. We can look at our covenants and how covenant repair and right relationship is a model for living together without violence. We can look to our UU history to know more and understand more about the through line from slavery to the current mass incarceration system. This is a very specific one. We could look at California's 2024 failure to pass a ballot initiative that would have repealed slavery in that state. I didn't know that had happened in California in 2024, so I'll have to look at that. We can look at restorative justice and transformative justice practices and how they work, and truth and reconciliation processes. We can look at how we are including formerly incarcerated people in the lives of our congregation and whether we have barriers to full participation here. Review of hiring and HR practices to make sure that they do not discriminate against formerly incarcerated people. Reviewing our own policies around conflict, safe congregations, and disruptive people with a restorative and transformative justice lens. And we could review whether our congregational investments and finances are supporting the prison industrial complex. Those are some ones that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. And then how can we build real relationships with people incarcerated in facilities near our congregations is another. All right, and online? Okay. So Tori says, I like the idea of exploring what is violence and what are the root causes, and also interested in emotional regulation as a way to interrupt violence. Great. So there's lots of more to come, basically. This is obviously the tip of the iceberg. We're just introducing that this is the study issue and where we might go from here. So expect to see some things offered, and I would just love to have people engage with this study issue as we roll out. And if you have an idea of something to offer, or something to try to get organized to do, please bring that to me. I'd love to support it happening here. So this is just another opportunity to engage with the larger UU conversation around how we put our faith into action. And then there will be the invitation to be part of the process for crafting that statement of conscience next year as well. So If that is of interest in how to participate in General Assembly, we get 6 delegates for this congregation. We almost never have all of our 6 spots full. So if this process gets really exciting and you want to like see it all the way through and be a General Assembly delegate, that can be done online now, so you don't have to travel to General Assembly the way Reverend Nancy described. Yeah, Carbon online. And we're inviting Zoe to speak.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. So Reverend Sarah, you know this is an issue important to me. And I also appreciate that many people did a lot of work in crafting the language. I think the language is very dense and inaccessible. And so with respect for those who did the work, I also encourage us internally to draft some language that would be more accessible. I wonder if we would have had more attendance today if people actually understood what we were going to be talking about. So so that's one thought overall. And this is just a personal thing. I'm much more interested in direct action. So some of those things that you listed in terms of, concrete steps that we can explore, that we can make a more immediate impact rather than 3 years down the line, just having come up with a focus rather than direct action. And the third thing I would mention is I actually am a little concerned about the word abolition as being so prominent, because just like the phrase defund the police, because we were, I'll speak for myself, and when I supported that movement, I wasn't really looking to defund the police as much as reallocate resources away from violent enforcement to more restorative and appropriate actions. So again, with respect to the people who have done the work and brought this to us, I just think that words matter, and that's something that should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, no, abolition is the extreme of what we're talking about, to completely abolish all. So it is a provocative word to bring into it. And I absolutely support that we should work on some plain language ways to talk about this at OUC. We probably can't rename the UUA congregational study issue because that's way beyond our scope. But how we talk about it here, we can talk about it using the language that works for us. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyone else with any last thoughts? Yes.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the list that you read off of your iPad and bringing it back down to the congregational level. And so I'm thinking about our covenant and how we support our covenant, how we treat each other, because one thing we know about violence is it's often the product of people not knowing how to solve a problem, how to get what they need. And so at the very most basic level, it's how we treat each other and get what we need.
Yeah. Yes, both within OUC and with our neighbors and our immediate neighborhood and community. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you for showing up for a forum that did have a dense and not very easy to figure out title. What on earth were we going to be talking about? And for your good ideas and how we can engage with this. Please watch for more. There will definitely be follow-up as we roll out some ways to engage with this. And with that, I extinguish our chalice. May this light of our aspirations, of what we hope to see in the world, live on in our hearts until we gather again. Thank you all.